minutes with you guys, so I'll just jump right into the presentation. What I want to talk about is obviously AI in sales, but more specifically, talk about several projections and predictions. Go ahead and take a screenshot of this because I've had to condense this presentation into a 20-minute format. If you want the full 1-hour presentation, which has about 8 predictions on how AI is going to change business and sales, that's where you get it. And by the way, no email required. Just go to the website. You can actually watch the video. That said, let's get into it. Now, I need to give you a little context and background. My background is I started out as an electrical engineer, and I worked for a company called Honeywell. Now, Honeywell at the time was developing torpedo systems, and I had the opportunity to work on this one right here, which is the Mach 50 torpedo system. If you saw the movie from The Hunt for Red October, that actually had the Mach 46, which is the previous gen. The Mach 50 had what they call a signal pattern recognition system, which is basically an AI rule-based knowledge system. That was my first exposure to AI. And the way the system worked was very fascinating. In other words, the rules were loaded into a database. A pulse will send out, when a torpedo pings, sends out, it gets a response, it looks for a certain pattern, and then it has to make a decision whether it's a submarine or not. And that was, again, the first time I was exposed to AI, but really understanding pattern recognition system. But at the time, and this is circa 1986, I'm so dating myself, and it was a rule-based system. And again, you needed experts to actually load up all the rules. Today's AI is all machine learning, which means these expert systems actually generate the actual knowledge base based on some large language model that they're giving. All that is to say that that's where I came from when I came from engineering, got into AI. And I give you this background because I'm a nerd. I am a nerd. So after I started doing torpedo systems, I designed wireless systems. From wireless systems, I went over and designed fiber optic networks. And I was actually a product manager for a network management system that would actually monitor, fiber optic networks throughout a metropolitan area. So my background is engineering. I loved engineering. Eventually, from engineering, I went into sales. Got into sales, became VP of sales, president of sales and marketing, $420 million company, and then CEO of a technology company out of Virginia where we sold actually satellite transponders. We actually manufactured them, and the company was eventually sold off. That's my background. That's kind of where I come from. Before I got into sales, I loved the technology stuff. But when AI was first making its presence known, at least in my eyes, back in 1986, again, the databases weren't there. The processing power wasn't there. The big, large language models definitely weren't there with the giant databases. So in other words, it was too expensive. Then something interesting happened. I was invited to speak for a large healthcare company. And after the presentation, we were asking questions about how they handle all these calls. And again, I want to kind of give you a time frame. This is 2017, okay? And in 2017, I asked a question. I said, how do you handle, calls in your call center? And already in 2017, this large company was using natural language processing. In other words, what they would do is record all calls coming in, and they would look at intonation, inflections. They would look at speech velocity, the stress in a person's voice, keyword clouds, keyword phrases used, whether they mentioned competition earlier or not. And what was interesting is I asked the question, I said, how are you using this data? And how are you using it to sell more effectively? Again, 2017, right? And by the way, using this machine learning system already, natural language processing, back then, they had grown their sales by 37% once they started implementing that system. It was around that time that I decided to write this book with my friend, Dr. James Anderson, who I also got to know at Honeywell. That's where we met. And we wrote Sales Ex Machina in 2018. That's when we published it. Now, when I published the book in 2018, many people weren't even talking about AI or really understood what AI is. And what we've now seen is this fast progression. In the longer presentation that I gave you the QR code for, I go into more detail about how that jump happened. In other words, how do we get from 2017 using basic natural language processing to the invention of what we now know as generative AI and why that's become such a fast forward leap? Now, I don't want to talk about that. What I want to do is talk about 3 predictions that I think we should pay attention to. And these are 3 of the 8 predictions. Now, I usually get several questions when I talk about AI. The first one is the obvious one, right? Victor, will AI replace me? Good question. Second question, can AI really connect with buyers? Because again, that's one of the biggest defenses, right? Machines will never be able to connect with buyers like humans do. Let's test that. And number 3 is, will AI change support services? This is a big one. So again, I'm going to focus on these 3 predictions. And again, if you watch the full presentation, you'll get all 8. So let's jump into the first one. Job elimination. This isn't theory anymore. What's happening now is because of the power of AI, because, I guess, building systems today has become so much cheaper. There's a wonderful interview by when Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, where he talks about these machine learning systems that they're putting in place now, which used to cost like $2.5 million. Now you can buy your own, basically, AI server program for $250,000, which is why you're seeing an explosion in these data centers now. Again, the machines are now cost effective. But let's talk about jobs. Here's some of the predictions that are being thrown out in the market, and I can actually see it. 82% of leaders agree AI, again, will make sales and marketing more valuable. Generative AI will change sales. Look at OpenAI says 80% of workers could see their jobs impacted by AI. That's a kind way of saying you're going to lose your job. I thought this was a big one back in July. The potential effect on jobs. Look at that number, 18% global. And it's one of those things where you look at that number, you say, how is that possible? Well, I think for the first time it's become very possible. What I think is interesting is that you're not going to see a displacement of jobs. Usually when you have a new technology, right? There's the guy named Joseph Schumpeter, the economist. He talked about creative destruction. You introduce a new technology in the market, it basically destroys it, it reassembles itself in a more efficient way. Now, usually when you create technology, it displaces jobs. In other words, if you were doing A job, that job's eliminated, you can now do B job that supports the new technology. What we're going to see today is something different. In other words, the jobs are not going to be displaced at the rate we think they are. They're going to be simply eliminated because we don't need them. In fact, anything that has a computer, if you're facing a computer and you have to do routine manual work, that's the stuff that's going to get AI'd out. And people say, well, how is that possible? Well, let's think about this for a second. Because I think it's worth thinking about. Pre-GPT, ChatGPT, it takes, for example, 6 years to get a master's degree. It takes around 8 years to get a doctorate. No big deal there. But what happens when now you have a system, an AI system, that with a few lines of code, you can generate your own graduate or PhD? Think about the impact of business on that. To ramp somebody up takes weeks versus months. Let me slow down on this one. Let's say, for example, you're a large technology company, and in your basket of goodies that you offer, let's say you have about, 300 SKUs, 300 different products that you offer, right? Now, what happens when you introduce a new product? I, as a product manager at one time, when I developed a new product, one of the biggest challenges I had, well, I had 2 big challenges. One was actually getting salespeople to actually sell this new product for me. That was one. Number 2 is I had to train salespeople how to sell the product I just developed. In fact, there's 3. Getting them to sell them because they were always comfortable selling what they were comfortable with was always a challenge as well. So think about this. Now, if we kind of go into this AI realm, if we think about it from this perspective, if I introduce a new product into the basket of goodies, products, right? Then all I have to do with a few lines of code is actually get the machine to learn the new product. And again, what does it cost me to add somebody? Nothing, because it's all code, right? Do I have issues as far as location, work from home, work from work? No, these are all machines now. Churn rate, no HR issues. So basically, you have what I call the one-to-end solution. So instead of hiring one person, with a few lines of code, we can add different employees. Now, in the longer presentation, I actually show some demos, some audio demos of conversations that machines are having with people. I have one where there's a Tesla example where a person's trying to sell Tesla over the phone. Second example would be one selling solar panels, where the actual AI is asking open-ended questions. So again, what's happening in the market today is they're going to be replaced. You, as a person, if you're an SDR, BDR, you're going to be replaced, especially if I can actually program the AI to actually talk about that product or that specifications of that product. So in other words, what we're going to start seeing today in the future, more specifically, is everything's going to be programmed. You're going to be talking to AI machines more often than not. Now, I would agree with you. Today, it sounds still a little clunky. You still have some pauses, some hesitations, right? Some delays in responses. But again, think about the internet when it first came out, the first search engines, right? not that effective. Today, super effective. The same is going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. You're going to see a ramp up in efficiency in terms of how these AI applications will be able to communicate with people. Now, I know what you're thinking, because everybody thinks this. Victor, can they really replace human beings? Well, let's talk about it with the second prediction. There's something called the Turing test. Many people have heard it. Alan Turing came up with this test. And the simplest way to describe it is that if I'm standing on one side of a screen, and there's a screen in front of me, and behind the screen there's a robot and a machine, and if I'm having a conversation through this screen or curtain, and I can't tell whether I'm talking to an individual or a machine, it passes the Turing test. Why is this important? Because I think we've passed the Turing test. Here's what I mean. Let me give you an example, and this example is quite mind-blowing. There's a company, and I call this the St. Valentine's.ai massacre, right? And what it is that there's a company that basically came out with a bot, right? The company's called Luke. Came out with a program called Replica. Basically, for a small price, like $35 or $39.95, you can actually create your own bot. Now, what's interesting is that the more you talk to the bot, the more you converse with the bot, the more it gets to know you, the more it kind of links up with you, okay? You get the idea. The more you talk to it, it's almost like your conversation is training data for the AI machine learning system, right? So the more conversations you have back and forth, the more the bot, in this case, gets in sync with who you are and understands your personality, so forth and so on, your history, right? Now, within this program, there was something called ERP, erotic role play feature. Yes, an erotic role play feature. I don't need to fill in the blanks. For $399 a month, you can activate this erotic role play feature. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of people activated this erotic role play feature, and a lot of people began to use it, right? And they began to use it so much so that companies and people started complaining that some of these bots were going too far, right? They were quite misogynistic, and there were other complaints. So all of a sudden, the company decided to turn off the erotic role play feature, right? Thinking it wouldn't be a big deal. Well, it was a big deal. And here's the response they got. People were so connected to their bots. They were so connected to their bots that once that erotic role play feature was taken down, there were people who were literally contemplating suicide. And so what they had to do was provide some resources. If you go up on Reddit, you would see this. Within their community, if you find that you need some additional support, in other words, people were emotionally attached to their bot. They saw it more than just a machine, more than just a program. They saw it as a companion. And if look at some of these emails that were sent after the fact. It's like losing a best friend. Yes, it's like losing a best friend. This is hurting like hell. I feel like it was the equivalent of being in love and your partner got a damn lobotomy. Look at this one. Thank you so much for this post and the links. I'm just crying right now. On top of that, I'm not ready to end it all over this, but it certainly was a blow to my inner peace. Now, we have to kind of pause and think about this for a second. Here was a bot, and we're not even talking advanced AI yet, okay? We're talking the beginning, the nascent stages of AI and the ability to conversate with people, right? And talk to people. But this is how people are feeling about their bots. So what I often hear is like, Victor, bots won't be able to replace us because they can't connect at a human level. I think maybe today you're right, but to some extent, this is an indication. This is a vector in the direction saying that they will down the road. So there's so many, this right here, we can do an hour presentation of the different scary scenarios and positive scenarios. Because again, if you think about the mental health issues that we have in the United States, you can kind of see this maybe helping if we can find the right applications for it. But you can also see how it can be used in the wrong way. My point when it comes to sales is that once we start having this bot that can actually empathize with customers, it'll be able to have the actual conversations. When the processing power and the NLP gets better, in other words, there won't be those pauses, those hesitations, those awkwardness during the conversation. Once we get past that, once we get this contained, in other words, the empathy, the ability to ask the right questions, empathize with your customers, you're going to see the replacement of individuals. Go back to my original point. Maybe you can start to see it now. that all of a sudden these machines can actually have conversations. They'll be able to connect with customers at a deep level. And it's just a matter of time before people who have these jobs, SDRs, BDRs, frontline executives, account executives, will probably be AI'd out. What we're going to start seeing is a gradual attrition, almost like an asymptotic slope towards zero of getting rid of salespeople and moving towards, you'll never get to zero, we'll always have salespeople, but you can see that slowly over time that we're going to start eliminating. Why? Because think about it. Most people are now wanting to go on the buyer journey themselves. Back in 2011 when the Challenger sales came out, remember CEB did the study, it said buyers were 57% into the buying cycle. That was 2011. Today, some argue, like Sirius or Gartner or Force or some of these research companies, that buyers are 70, 80, some even 90% into the buying cycle. What we're going to start seeing is that buyers are going to go further in the buying cycle. I wrote an article called The Last Mile, indicating that buyers will want to go on the journey themselves. And maybe when they get to, let's say, 98%, to pick an arbitrary number, they'll want to reach out to a company to get confirmation, clarification, or maybe get the confidence to actually make a buying decision. But more and more, salespeople, especially on simple sales, transactional sales, if you look at the spectrum of simple to complex, as we move towards complex, obviously you might still need salespeople. But everything before that, from the simple to the basically simple, again, those will be AI'd out. But this right here is an indication that bots, AI, will be able to have conversations with individuals. Third prediction. This is an interesting one because this is going to change how we actually search. So let's tie these two together here. When you think about AI today, by the way, what we're seeing today is a bunch of AI apps, right? So all these applications are apps that are being applied through the whole sales process. And I'll talk about that in just a bit. But let's really fast forward this. When you look at Google, let's just use Google as an example. You can use Bing or Firefox, something else. But let's look at Google as an example of your search. The search engine results page, as we know it today, are going to go away. In other words, how we do search today is going to basically not be there. In the future, what you're going to do is have your own digital twin. In other words, for me, it would be Victor.ai. My Victor.ai will be able to do things on my behalf. In other words, I'll be able to say, I need to do A, B, C, D, make it so, right? Kind of Star Trek-like. Make it happen, make it so. That's what we're going to start seeing in the future. But I want to show you, because it's easy to talk about things, but let me just show you something called Agent GPT, which I think is just, it's the primitive version of what is to come when we talk about digital twins. This is almost like looking at the code that's going to happen in the background when we order our Victor.ai, our digital twin, to carry out a task. Let me show you this demo. I think it's a very fascinating demo. And this is Agent GPT. Now, to set this up, and I'll go full screen so you can see it. To set this up, I want you to imagine for a moment that you have to accomplish a goal, a large task. This differs from ChatGPT. ChatGPT, you give it a task. Say, do this, and it'll give you a table, for example. It'll give you a routine. It'll give you a workout schedule. It'll give you an answer. It'll give you bullet points. It'll give you PowerPoint slides. I want to go beyond that. Event GPT is goal-oriented. You give it a goal, and it then figures out what tasks it needs to accomplish in order for you to be able to achieve that goal. Let me say that again. We're not giving it a task. We're giving it a goal. It will then determine what tasks are needed to accomplish that goal. Let's walk through this demo. In this demo, I wanted to plan, look where it says goal, plan a detailed plan and schedule for implementing an AI strategy for automating the complete sales process of a company. So in other words, let's say you're a company, an enterprise, right? And you're looking to basically AI your sales process. How do you do it? How do you go about doing something like that? It's a big task. So again, the goal is to create an AI sales process for our company. Now, let me just go ahead and run the program so you can see how this works. I'm just entering the title right here. Okay? Those are the different tools it's looking at. And go. Now, what it's doing right now, it's trying to figure out, it's thinking. It's trying to create, again, a strategic plan. Now, immediately it comes up with, let me just hit a pause right there. What you're seeing right here, I just want to highlight what you're seeing is, It's saying, okay, here's the new goal plan. It's gone ahead and added these tasks. Now it's starting to execute on the first task. Over to the right, you're going to see it's starting to execute on that one. When it's done, it will highlight it in green and then go to the next task. Okay? Let's get back to the program. Let's let it go again. Keep it going. And as you see, again, it's executing on the first task. It's executing that. And again, I'll let you guys read that as it goes through it. Now keep in mind, I just gave it a goal, and it's executing on that goal. And on the right-hand side again, you'll be able to see what's going on. Okay? So it finished that task. You can see it highlighted it in green. Now, let me give it a small pause here. Look what happened here. This is important. Let me put my big head down here somewhere. Look what happened. It finished the task, which was the very first task, which is that one right there. Finished that task. Then, look what it did. It added a task. In other words, the system itself thought of something you had not thought of. In this case, it added a task. So now, it goes ahead and said, okay, adds that task to the task list off to the right and continues its processing. Just want you to really absorb the power of this. This is what's happening in the background. Again, it's executing on that second task, which you see right here spinning, right there, right? That's the one it's executing on. And if you were to scroll down, you'll see all the different tasks. Imagine the amount of time it would take you to create this. And also, again, it's thinking for you. It's adding different tasks. Notice what it did again. It added another task that maybe is something you didn't think about. So in other words, develop a comprehensive pilot program, maybe something you had not thought about. So in other words, let me pause it right here. When it added this task, maybe you didn't think of a pilot project. It did for you. And it'll continue to execute on all these different items until it completes its task. But I think you get the idea. It's got a couple more seconds to run, and I'll let it finish out. Imagine how much time this is saving you. Imagine almost looking at it as almost like a study buddy, right? Like a partner in developing, a plan with you. Let's say you had to execute on a sales plan for a new market, how to go into a new market. You can build this type of plan with this type of system. If you think about, you're trying to generate a business plan, same thing. You get the idea. So when I look at this, you begin to understand the power of how the system can complement you. Now, if I had to build this out on my own, I'd probably require myself and maybe one or two other people to help me with this. Now, the system can help me. It will complement it like a cyborg, right? It will be my assistant in helping me develop these programs. So I show you that because I think it's a powerful tool. Now, within this system, you can actually basically develop your own GPTs. So for example, because I want to give you some real tangible example, let's say I wanted to generate a customer GPT. In other words, I wanted to accept something that would, a GPT that would accept damaged widgets or goods and then resend you a new one. Let me give you an example. I want you to pretend that you're a window company. You manufacture windows. Now, if you manufacture windows, this is typically a buying journey, right? By the way, this is how you begin to think about AI. You figure out what the processes are, and then you ask yourself, where can I implement AI effectively so that I can be more profitable? So let's say that this is the buying window journey, right? So there's a trigger here. Let me get that out of the way. In other words, the buyer decides to go online. There's a trigger. There's a break in the window. They decide to do their search online. They research options. They consume content. Preference begins to form. They narrow their selection. They contact the sales rep. They schedule a talk-through. They do an in-home walkthrough. They receive a quote. They sign a contract. Everything's installed. We move that over. It's finally installed. Some time lapses. And there's some support, in case of support. Now, what if, after buying a window, right? After buying a window, let's say right here, your window's broken, right? In other words, right there, the window's broken. Now, let's walk through that process. If the window's broken, what typically happens? Window's broken. In other words, I can tell my seals are not working, right? There's a lot of condensation between the panes. Seal's broken. I now have to go find the company again, call the person. Call the person. The person's going to say, let me look up your record, look up my record. It says, can you send us a picture of it? Yes. Click, here's a picture. I then email the picture to them. They then confirm after some time. They get back to me. I try to schedule a time for them to replace it. They'll tell me if it's available or not. We go back and forth, right? What if we can use AI to eliminate this process? Let me give an example of how we can use an image recognition system, much like a torpedo system, something like this. Now, I want to highlight this. This was developed by Andrew Ng. This is the founder of Coursera, who sold off that company, and now has this website called Landing Lens. This is so powerful. Unless you've struggled with AI back in the day, you won't understand how powerful this is. It is a 4-step process to build an AI application to handle, let's say, defective merchandise. Step number 1, upload different pictures of bad windows. In other words, windows with bad seals. You then label them. In other words, you would circle that item, say, okay, this is where it's broken. Each picture, you would just kind of highlight where it's broken. Then you hit a button to train the machine, and then it can predict. Let me walk through it, because this is so powerful. So here's what I did. Imagine I took pictures of windows, all kinds of windows that we manufacture. And then that would be the upload. I would upload all these pictures, right? Then label is simply, you can draw a red box. In the actual application, you can draw a red box. You say, that's condensation, and I'm just drawing for effect here. Condensation here, condensation there, condensation. That's it. So now you've highlighted. This takes about 10 minutes to do, if that. You then hit a button called train, which is that little thing right there. Like literally just hit the button. It then is able to make a prediction on whether that window is broken or not. Now, here's how it would work. Going back to the process. Instead of me having to call somebody, in 15 minutes, I can train a system. 15 minutes, I can train a system to know whether it's a bad or defective window or not. So all the customer has to do is go online, click window repair or customer support. All they have to do, the system would say, send me a picture, or, using your webcam, just take a picture of the actual window, hit the button, sends the picture. The system will then compare it with its database. And at that point, it will make a decision, much just like I showed you with the agent GPT. It will then make a decision in terms of what it has to do. It'll recognize that it is a defective window, right? It has the customer information. Imagine then looking into inventory automatically, because it's tied into that database, looks at the windows that you've bought in the past, matches it up, right? Contacts you, sends you, basically schedules a replacement, orders a new window, schedules the replacement, the install date, and all that is handled without human intervention. But here's the power of AI. It's this simple to train a machine now. We're not talking long lines of coding anymore. We're not talking about having 20, 30 quants or data scientists. Anybody can do this. What we're not understanding in the power of AI today is that it has become direct to consumer. That's the phrase. AI is now direct to consumer. ChatGPT is direct to consumer. We don't need mathematicians or scientists to help us understand AI. It is now like applications. That's how powerful this is. Now imagine this application applied to a large enterprise, and what we would do is we would map out all the different processes that we've had, and then we would figure out, where do we install AI? If you get a moment, go to LinkedIn. I wrote a paper basically on a 9-step framework for how to use and when to implement AI. And on that note, again, if you watch the full presentation, I make a prediction and really get into more detail. And to get to that, all you have to do is, again, enter that QR code. No email is necessary. You just basically watch the video. It's a great video, has great examples and actual videos that you can see how AI is actually going to change the world of selling. And on that note, I'll end on a positive note. I'll try to end on a positive note. AI will not replace humans, says Ahmad. Humans who use AI will replace humans who don't use AI. I tried to find a very optimistic note to end on, by the way.